war clouds over Iran. I don't have a lot of update for you. We're going to do a segment on it because everything's being kept very, very tight in Washington and Israel, because you can't signal what you're going to do to an opposing army. You have to do it fast, and you have to do it kind of in secret. Now, I've said from the very beginning that nobody's going to launch an attack while the Olympics are underway, but they close up on Sunday. And the State of the Union is on Tuesday. So we are in a window where there could be military action on Sunday night or Monday, whatever. Remember, Iran is 8 hours ahead or something like that. And it would be a darkness play. So I'm giving you what I have, which isn't much. If I get anything further, stay close to BillO'Reilly.com. And it's a huge story, but here's really an interesting social wrinkle. More Americans are interested in the Savannah and Nancy Guthrie story in Arizona, the kidnapping of Mrs. Guthrie, than they are in this. And if you step back and you think about it, I understand why people are interested in the Guthrie story. It's a mystery. It's terrible. Mom is involved. I got it. It's emotional all over the place. But also, the pundits that are out there hour after hour after hour don't know anything. They just speculate and guess and gobble up airtime with nothing. That's why we don't do it here. We don't know. Once something happens, of course, we'll report it. But the Iranian situation is far more important for the world, for the United States, and for you. Far more important. Yet given the choice to sit there for 20, 30 minutes and listen to Guthrie or Iran, vast amount of Americans will choose the Guthrie story. I don't know if I'm disturbed by that. I understand it. It's a little unsettling because people just don't understand how dangerous this world is. Iran's a dangerous place, and they're desperate now. And speaking about lack of awareness, I'm going to take you into New York City, a place you probably don't want to go to at this point. But everything I told you about Mayor Mamdani is coming true in a lightning fashion. It's startling. And it's not just New York, it's everywhere, because Seattle has got a communist mayor. All right, you saw what happened in Minneapolis. You saw what happened in Los Angeles. This is really getting to be intense, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So Zohran Mamdani has been in office for 7 weeks. He's 34 years old. As I've said, in a very nasty way, he's not qualified to run a Taco Bell, much less a city of 8.5 million, the largest city in the country. Now, under his regime, 7 weeks again, 19 people frozen to death. 19 human beings. Because Mamdani would not carry out Code Blue. Now, Code Blue has been in place for decades. It says when the temperature drops below a certain point, wind chill included, that the police take homeless people and indigenous people, people just running around, usually drug or alcoholics involved, okay, you take them and you put them in a warming center temporarily. Now, a lot of these people don't want to go, but the cops just take them forcefully. And Mamdani said, no, don't do that. Now he's backtracking on it, okay? But that's exactly what happened. And 19 people are dead. Now you go, why? Why would anybody, communist, socialist, capitalist, why would any mayor not enforce Code Blue to the utmost? I don't know. I don't know. I do know that this is not a rational person, Mamdani. He's not. Okay, I don't know what his thought process is. I've never met him. I don't know. I'm glad I don't live in New York City. I'm about 10 miles away from the city border. And it's a whole different world where I am. In addition, Mamdani now says that he wants to raise property taxes on 3 million New Yorkers, mostly working class people in Queens and Brooklyn, Staten Island, some in the Bronx, all right, by 10%, 9.5%. Do you know how devastating that's going to be to those people to raise their property tax like that? It's like taking 10% of your assets away every year. And he's doing this because he can't afford to pay for his giveaway programs, the hallmark of the communists. Can't afford to pay for free childcare, free buses, free food. He can't do it because the city is already running a record deficit, highest deficit in the country, New York. I mean, they make fun of California and they mock California, but New York has got a $12 billion deficit. He's never going to be able to pay it off. Even if you sold the Empire State Building and you sold Brooklyn. And Mamdani wants to do all these freebies, and it takes money. So 10%. And nobody can stop him. Okay? Albany can't stop him. Albany can stop Mamdani from raising taxes, income taxes. Can't stop property taxes. So this is, again, 7 weeks, 19 dead, 10% rise on your property tax. And that's just the beginning. Just the beginning. Now, many, perhaps most, of Mamdani's supporters don't own any property. They live in rentals. So his constituency isn't affected by this, all right, as much as the others. They're poor people. That's who voted for Mamdani, and a lot of them in New York City. And they don't care. I mean, it doesn't affect them whether the property taxes go up. They just want free stuff. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. If you're poor, you need help. And that's how Mamdani got elected. Now, just on the basic day-to-day in New York City, it took the city 14 days, 2 weeks to remove the snowstorm. 14 days. And I told you that the unions aren't going to work for this guy. And as they couldn't remove the snow, or wouldn't, one of the two, and we're talking less than 2 feet here, they got 20 inches, whatever. Garbage piled up, right? And it wasn't collected, which you knew was going to happen. So this is just occurring at lightning speed, the decline of the largest city in the country. By this time next year, I will predict New York City will be a fiscal disaster, a catastrophe. And yes, I know there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people moving out, but Mamdani wants that because one of his big issues is housing affordability. If you have all these people moving out of New York, which will happen, then their houses go on the market, and then there's a glut of houses, so the prices come down. That's what Mamdani wants. And now, is he doing it on purpose, wrecking the city so people move? I don't think so, but it's possible. But the point of this is, and Seattle is going through the same thing, because you got a communist mayor there, Katie Wilson. I mean, it's just inconceivable. But if Americans continue to not pay attention, all right, to live in bubbles created by social media, and to vote for these kinds of people, these communist, socialist people, this is what you're going to get. This is it. 89% of the Cuban population, 89%, live in poverty. You think you're going to prosper in that kind of a communist, socialist arena? You're not. Yet millions of Americans are too stupid, too apathetic to understand the danger. And that's the matter. All right, let's go to the media because it's an interesting story. So you know about The View, okay? It's a propaganda show, but it's under the ABC News banner. The news division of ABC Disney controls The View, but it's not a news show. It's not gathering information. In fact, last year, didn't book one non-liberal guest on the show. Not one. And they had Schwarzenegger on talking about how his muscles are sagging or something, but, come on. So it's a propaganda show, entertainment. That's what it is. Enter the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. It is threatening now Disney because of The View. And The View is violating what the FCC says is the equal time rule, okay? Section 315 of the Communications Act. It says, quote, if any licensee shall permit any person who is legally qualified candidate for any public office to use a broadcasting station, he shall afford equal opportunities to all other such candidates for that office. So if The View brings on some liberal person who's running for office, they have to bring on a conservative, but they don't. Now, there's an exception to what I just read. That is, if you are a bona fide news organization, you don't have to do that. And the reason is because the person involved may be in a scandal or maybe in a controversy or maybe doing something. You got to cover that. And you don't have to give equal time if the person's an office holder. Okay? That makes perfect sense. But Brandon Carr, the head of the FCC, is saying The View is not a news program. It's hiding behind that. And so there's a big investigation being launched on The View. Now, will this lead to anything? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I could be wrong. I don't know why Disney does it. It's hurt their brand so badly. And I was on The View, a dozen times, but it was a whole different thing then. Barbara Walters ran it. Now, at the same time, Colbert, who's going to be leaving the air May 21st, CBS wants him out of there so badly, he tried to book a Texas congressman, James Tallarico, who's running against a whole bunch of people for the Senate, okay, including Jasmine Crockett. It's a big Democratic primary in Texas. So Colbert, for whatever reason, Colbert's another one, never books anybody who's not liberal, ever. But Colbert is obviously an entertainment program. And they're not saying it's news. And it falls under the Equal Protection Act. So CBS lawyers said to Colbert, hey, if you're going to put Tallarico on, you got to put on all of the other people running against him. Colbert didn't like that. So Colbert pulled Tallarico off his show and put him on the internet. That's what Colbert did. And then Colbert went on his show and said this, go. There isn't any talk show exception that I can find. He just made that up. But he's telling the truth in previous administrations didn't enforce the rules. But there were very few of these kinds of controversies. But he's right, Colbert's right. They didn't enforce, but there's no exception, written exception that I can find. And I could be wrong. If I am, I'll tell you. Okay, so what is happening here is the Trump administration is so angry about how the media, corporate media, Disney, CBS, NBC, all of them, CNN, have treated him, that they're taking the letter of the law and enforcing it. That's what's happening. Epstein. This story is never going to go away. It's going to be like the JFK assassination. Years and years and years and years of stuff. Anyway, Prince Andrew's been arrested. He's not a prince anymore. He got booted out of the prince thing. So he's just Andrew. So he's been arrested. But it's different to be arrested in England than it is in the United States. So they can only hold you one day. All right? And they haven't charged Andrew with anything. What we understand is that he was, in 2010, Andrew, a, quote, special envoy for international trade. And he dealt with Epstein on that. I don't know how. Okay? And anyway, so it looks like they're trying to get Andrew and put him in prison. Because everybody knows, unfortunately, that Andrew did commit crimes and got away with them. And that's true, in my opinion. I can't prove it, but this guy and Epstein, you know, if it walks like a duck, all of that. But I can't prove it. Anyway, I don't expect him to be charged, Andrew, but maybe they will. I think they're trying to just tamp down the British outrage because the public's outraged over there. All right, new poll, Reuters, so-so poll. 1,117 respondents talking about Epstein. First question, the Epstein files show that powerful people are rarely held accountable. Strongly agree, 69%. Whoa. Somewhat agree, 17%, disagree, 11%. So that's what drives the story. Everybody believes that the wealthy and powerful got away with something here. Second question, the files have lowered my trust in political and business leaders. Strongly agree, 53. Somewhat agree, 24. Disagree, 19. Was the fix in? Yes, to some extent. Because Epstein got tried in Florida. That should have been a federal beef. He got a very light term for what he did with the underage girls. Then he gets out, does the same thing again, and a whole bunch of powerful people hung around with him, and none of them were indicted, with one caveat, all right? In order to make a case, the Justice Department has to have a complaining witness. So you have to go in and file a criminal complaint against Andrew or whoever else harmed you. And that has not happened. And that's what's holding all of this stuff up. So if somebody comes forward and said, Andrew did this to me on this date, and I was 15, you got adjudicated. But so far, we don't have that record. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it, you know, there is a stair step to the criminal justice system. But I do believe that a lot of authorities in Florida and the federal government, remember, Biden didn't do anything about this for 4 years. You never heard this because the Clintons were involved. And the Clintons will have to testify next week. But they did look away. Final thought of the day, if you spend any time on social media, you know that a bunch of high-profile folks that have various programs and forums feud from time to time, call each other names, and going on 30 years. I did it a little bit, and then I figured out how dumb it was to do. So we don't do that anymore unless somebody's hurting you. Somebody's hurting you, I'll take them on. But back and forth, I understand the appeal of it. Everybody likes a good show. So I was on WABC with Sid Rosenberg. I do that every Thursday morning, and here's what I said about it.
So the feuding helps the people on both sides. It brings attention to them. And it's so hard to get an audience now because it's fragmented across the board. Everything's blown up. And when Trump leaves, it's going to be a debacle for television news.
Oh.
It's so hard that if you want to get attention, you throw a hand grenade at somebody, and then that somebody replies. That's what's going on. Now, that doesn't offend me. I don't get involved with it, but if you guys want to brawl it out, okay. That's okay with me, but I'm not going to do it.
And it does get pretty nasty sometimes. But, these very hard to get people's attention now in this country where we live in. There are a few of us who command attention because we've been around so long. I hope you saw the Cuomo program on News Nation last night with Stephen A. Smith and me. It was so funny. I really, that's worth looking up. And, so people know us. But other people want to get attention. That's the quickest way to get it. is to go in and slash and burn. So that's what's going on. All right. I want you to have a nice weekend. News column on Sunday. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching the No Spin News. We'll see you again on Monday. It's part of our lives, but it's distant from personal behavior, your personal circumstance. Polls say the American people believe the press is largely corrupt, which it is, and they can't do much about it because we have the First Amendment and all of that. And giant corporate media controls pretty much what you see on television and the major urban newspapers. That's changing because of social media, but it's still there. Now, television news in particular still has some power. It can ruin people. And it's not hard to do that. So linking anybody with Jeffrey Epstein, my God, no matter what the circumstance, is your name with his name, brutal. And if a news agency goes after you and wants to destroy you, it can do it. And it can also, the American media, protect people. That's the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So the Rhode Island shooting was horrendous. Here's a high school hockey game, all right? And a guy shows up, Robert Dorgan, 56 years old. He kills his ex-wife, Rhonda, and his adult son, Aiden. He critically wounds Rhonda Dorgan's parents and a family friend, and then he commits suicide at the arena. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that, right? So it got a lot of coverage, but part of the story was ignored, that Robert Dorgan was a trans person who wanted to be called Roberta Dorgan. Okay. Here are the agencies that did not mention that while covering this story in Rhode Island: the Associated Press, CNN, ABC News, NBC News, MS, the New York Times. Somehow did not mention that the murderer was a trans person. No excuse for that. It's part of the story. I don't know the circumstance of this man, woman, whatever. I don't know. But when you are a trans person, that needs to be reported. Okay? But these agencies don't. That is deceitful. Now, their excuse is, well, we don't want to demonize trans people. Okay, but that's not your job. If you want to get into sociology, get out of journalism and go into sociology. Your job is to report the facts. Canada, not as bad, but the Associated Press is the absolute worst now. So remember, on February 10th, guy kills 8 people, 18-year-old. He's transing to a woman. But I guess he's a guy, but I don't know. Jesse Van Rooselaar kills 8 people and he wounds 17 others in one of the worst mass shootings in Canadian history. Okay. The Associated Press doesn't mention that he was in transition. The Associated Press goes out all over the world. And I'm sitting here going, I would have fired every single editor at the AP. Again, same reason, because the Associated Press didn't identify the trans person in Rhode Island. Oh, no. We're not going to do that because it's going to demonize. Now, I'm not the type of guy that says, well, trans people are mass murderers. I'd never do that. You go where the evidence takes you. I'll tell you, it's not a difficult situation. It is a difficult situation, I should say. It's a tough road. And that can cause a lot of mental problems. That story should be told. Not told. Okay? So it's disturbing, but it's not unique. The press has been covering for a lot of people. And let me give you a few examples. The biggest example is President Biden. Everybody knew that Biden was not mentally up to running this country. But the only reason that he did not run for re-election is because of the debate. So Americans saw for themselves. Press corps knew, because Biden avoided it. Okay, they knew that he was doddering. They knew he wasn't doing a job every day. He was knocking off at 3, starting at noon. They know all that. The White House corps knew it, covered it up. No doubt. Absolutely. I knew. All of my journalistic friends knew. Wasn't reported. Then you had the George Floyd looters. Remember that? Unbelievable destruction across the country. Did you do any follow-up on that? How many were arrested? How many went to jail? How many were involved in violent activities? Who they were? Who financed it? Did you get any of that? No. Total blackout. Compare that to January 6th. When the rioters there, they were identifying almost every one of them by name and face. So the looters for George Floyd, they get off, no exposure, but the January 6th rioters, many of them went to jail. They were pardoned by President Trump. And the final one is Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis. There's no question I made this, and nobody can refute it, that the 2 Americans who were killed, Renee Good and Alex Pretty, would be alive today if Mayor Frey had upheld his oath of office and protected the public. Okay? You don't have to subscribe to ICE. You don't have to help ICE. All you had to do was put Minneapolis cops between ICE and the protesters so nobody would get hurt. So any kind of a violent situation could be diffused by the local police before it got into the ICE precinct. That's not hard to do. Yet Frey and many of the press reports treated as sympathetic. We absolutely, those 2 dead people are on him. And you can't refute it. Absolutely, all he had to do, send the cops out there and make sure that public safety was upheld. That's all he had to do. Wouldn't do it for political reasons. So the press at this point not coming back. There's not going to be a renaissance. It's not going to be a rise of noble behavior. And many of us have left the corporate media and gone on our own. And obviously you're looking at the poster boy for that. And I have to tell you, there's so much relief involved. So I don't have to do this. I can report to you the news honestly. And that's the memo. All right, new poll, Reuters, so-so poll. 1,117 respondents talking about Epstein. First question, the Epstein files show that powerful people are rarely held accountable. Strongly agree, 69%. Whoa. Somewhat agree, 17%, disagree, 11%. So that's what drives the story. Everybody believes that the wealthy and powerful got away with something here. Second question, the files have lowered my trust in political and business leaders. Strongly agree, 53. Somewhat agree, 24. Disagree, 19. Was the fix in? Yes, to some extent. Because Epstein got tried in Florida. That should have been a federal beef. He got a very light term for what he did with the underage girls. Then he gets out, does the same thing again, and a whole bunch of powerful people hung around with him, and none of them were indicted, with one caveat. all right, in order to make a case, the Justice Department has to have a complaining witness. So you have to go in and file a criminal complaint against Andrew or whoever else harmed you. And that has not happened. And that's what's holding all of this stuff up. So if somebody comes forward and said, Andrew did this to me on this date, and I was 15, you got adjudicated. But so far, we don't have that record. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it, there is a stair step to the criminal justice system. But I do believe that a lot of authorities in Florida and the federal government, remember, Biden didn't do anything about this for 4 years. You never heard this because the Clintons were involved. And the Clintons will have to testify next week. But they did look away. Gavin Newsom. So he's campaigning for president already. You know that. There's a poll, Emerson College, just in California. Okay, 1,000 registered voters, just out. Democrats 50%, Republicans 27%, because that's a voter registration in California. So Emerson did its job. First question, do you approve or disapprove? Job Gavin Newsom is doing. Disapprove 45, approve 44, never heard of him 11. Never heard of him. How can you live in California and never heard of him? Because you're a bubble person. That's why. All right, so it's evenly split. But with the Democratic majority being so vast, that's not a good number for the governor. 53% of Californians say they have considered leaving the state because of the high cost of living. 47% are hanging tough. All right, let's go to Iran. So I last talked with President Trump a little more than 2 weeks ago about Iran. He doesn't want to bomb it because thousands of Persians will be killed. Innocent people, regular people, because the mullahs hide behind those people, just like Hamas in Gaza, and the Revolutionary Guard does the same thing. So very hard with sustained air power not to have civilian casualties, and that's what President Trump is worried about. Doesn't want worldwide pictures of 50,000 dead Persians. So the only way to do this is to bomb military installations, which will happen. And I've always been an advocate of taking out the ports of Iran, but that'll hurt the people if they do that, because they'll starve. No, nothing in, nothing out. But the president, I understand, I could be wrong on this, because I'm getting it third hand, not from him, is still hoping he comes to some kind of deal with the mullahs. And that window is closing fast. So two congressmen, Ro Khanna, Democrat California, Thomas Massie, Republican Kentucky, both do not like President Trump at all. They're saying, oh no, we have to go to Congress to get approval. Same old thing. Heard it a million times. It's not going to happen. If Trump wants to go in, Trump will go in. But Khanna in particular had a pretty interesting explanation for him trying to prevent any presidential action against Iran. Roll it.
Thomas Massie and I are going to force a vote next week in Congress to stop a war in Iran. Sources say that there is a 90% chance that Trump will launch a major invasion of Iran. It would be a colossal blunder to have another war in the Middle East. We need Congress to go on record next week to say no war in Iran.
So that is so crazy. And I'm speaking as a skeptic of military action in the Middle East because of what happened in Iraq. Okay? I'm very cautious there. But no war in Iran? Like, they're not responsible for all the other wars? You got to connect those dots there, Ro. It wouldn't be a Gaza Hamas if not for Iran. Wouldn't be a Lebanon Hezbollah. Wouldn't be the Houthis firing at people in the Red Sea. And then you got this nation sworn to kill Americans and Israelis. You're an American, Ro, they're swearing to kill you and your family. And they're developing nukes. And they have ballistic missiles. And you don't want any action, bro? You just want to let it go? Kind of like Biden and John Kerry, Barack Obama, they're letting it go. Come on. You know, final thought of the day, if you spend any time on social media, you know that a bunch of high-profile folks that have various programs and forums feud from time to time, call each other names, and going on 30 years. I did it a little bit, and then I figured out how dumb it was to do. So we don't do that anymore unless somebody's hurting you. Somebody's hurting you, I'll take them on. But back and forth, I understand the appeal of it. Everybody likes a good show. So I was on WABC with Sid Rosenberg. I do that every Thursday morning, and here's what I said about it.
So the feuding helps the people on both sides. It brings attention to them. And it's so hard to get an audience now because it's fragmented across the board. Everything's blown up. And when Trump leaves, it's going to be a debacle for television news.
Oh.
It's so hard that if you want to get attention, you throw a hand grenade at somebody, and then that somebody replies. That's what's going on. Now, that doesn't offend me. I don't get involved with it, but if you guys want to brawl it out, okay. That's okay with me. But I'm not going to do it.
And it does get pretty nasty sometimes. But, these very hard to get people's attention. Now, in this country where we live in, there are a few of us who command attention because we've been around so long. I hope you saw the Cuomo program on News Nation last night with Stephen A. Smith and me. It was so funny. I really, that's worth looking up. And, so people know us. But other people want to get attention. That's the quickest way to get it is to go in and slash and burn. So that's what's going on. All right. I want you to have a nice weekend. News column on Sunday. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching the No Spin News. We'll see you again on Monday.